Kyren Williams may be the most disrespected fantasy back heading into the season, while Puka Nacua and Davante Adams team up as the top wide receiver duo in the NFL. We dig into the top 3 storylines for the Los Angeles Rams in today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk. And when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with the NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today, we're going to be discussing the top 3 storylines for the Los Angeles Rams as we enter the 2025 season. This is just a really exciting offense and a lot of good fantasy pieces here, with Kyren Williams being a top 10 fantasy back in each of the last 2 seasons, even better than that, actually. And then Puka Nacua has been electric throughout his young career, with Davante Adams looking to finish up his NFL career, maybe with the Rams. So those two combining together, that will be the first time we're seeing that exciting duo. And can they turn Matthew Stafford into a top 12 fantasy quarterback? These are all things we want to discuss today with you. So let's start with Kyren Williams. Vinny, I personally think he's the most underrated fantasy RB1, like a guy that you're taking as an RB1. He's going as running back 11 right now off the board, but he's been the running back 7 overall last year, running back 8 in points per game, and the running back 2 on average in 2023. And those are really, he didn't play much in 2022. So over his 2 seasons of actually being the lead back for the Rams, he has now averaged the 3rd most fantasy points per game during that span, behind only Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley. So why is he going running back 11, Vinny?
It's very funny to me because I'm one of those guys that have been skeptical, only because the history says that a player such as Kyren Williams, a late round draft pick, Will Slight, had injury issues early in his career, and the nature of the Rams, right? They're fickle and going to different lead backs, and they're not really super committed to one guy since the Todd Gurley heyday. All of a sudden, that has flipped, and they have found a guy that is staying durable, staying rather productive after that first season. And I know he misses time, but a lot of running backs miss time with injury, attrition, and all that. But all you've seen from him is 26 touchdowns in the past couple seasons. That has been his big calling card. And when you look at that number, there's only 3 people ahead of him. That's Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen, who just score in ridiculous bunches for quarterbacks, and Derrick Henry after last year. But you look at him, he has as many touchdowns as Jahmyr Gibbs in the last 2 seasons. So that might surprise some people, but he's a double-digit machine in there. And I think that is his biggest path to scoring. I mean, I don't think touchdowns, we talk about them being random, but they're not random in his case because they trust him a lot in the red zone and in scoring position. So he's their best option when they get down there. They don't really look to like a Tyler Higbee or a tight end down in the red zone. Cooper Kupp is now gone. That might change a little bit with the targets because Davante Adams, we know, is a very good red zone receiver all throughout his career. But look at, they do trust Williams. They don't mess around. They don't put in some other back. Okay, you've come to the 1-yard line, we're going to slam in somebody else. They're not going to run Stafford up the middle on quarterback sneaks. So you don't have to worry about that either. They're not going to say, okay, it's Blake Corum time. They don't operate that way. Sean McVay is a little old school, and that means the back that's the lead back stays on the field through all the situations. And we've also seen some very consistent usage out of him in the past couple of years. That means we're going to expect him to carry the ball in most running situations. He's going to get the ball all over the field, whether it's early in the drive or late, he's going to touch the ball in that capacity. And the receiving is not going to be a big time for him, but it's capable of giving you those 35 to 40 catches, right? The yardage that we've seen to kind of pad those touchdowns. So when you put it all together, he's a very good, just solid back. And now you've had 2 years of very good evidence of this. And that's what we needed, right? We have the evidence now. He's still a very young back. I've always liked him coming out of Notre Dame. He's the RB11 on the board, but he was RB8 last year in average scoring and RB2 the year before. So I don't see how we're just going to randomly drop him, right? If we like this offense even more, his role stays the same. Sean McVay is still there. The competition is about the same with Corum and Jarquez Hunter coming in. So I don't see why we drop him, and I don't see why we necessarily want to put him behind guys like Devin Achane and Josh Jacobs. Similar situations, right? Where I just think just take Kyren Williams at this point. Like I give up. I'm not going to be contrary on Kyren Williams anymore. He's given me enough evidence to go in the other direction.
Yeah, there's just really no reason for him to be this low. And a big part of his production is, of course, the workload, but I don't see that going down. Sean McVay has just always liked to use one guy. Now, he's had trouble finding guys to stay healthy, right? Like Todd Gurley got all the work until he was too injured. Cam Akers, whenever he was healthy, got it. Darrell Henderson, whenever he had to be stepped up, it was just him. Like he prefers to use one back as long as he can. And Kyren Williams last year, he played on 82% of the team's offensive snaps last year. No other no other running back, I should say, played more than 75%, and that was Bijan Robinson. And Bijan was the only other guy over 70% among running backs. Saquon Barkley was third at 69%. And again, Kyren Williams was at 82% of team snaps. He just gets so much playing time. He also led the NFL with 43% of team touches last year and 70% of team rushing attempts. You mentioned the touchdowns at 26. He also has brought in 5 receiving touchdowns during the last 2 seasons too. So 15 touchdowns in 2023, 16 in 2024. And like you said, we expect this offense to be better. So there's really no reason to expect these touchdowns to decline. When you're looking at him behind Devin Achane, like you mentioned, Christian McCaffrey, if we don't know his Achilles will hold up. Josh Jacobs, who just hasn't shown the consistency that Kyren Williams has. Jonathan Taylor, same thing. And then Bucky Irving are taking a shot on him, taking continuing his success at the end of last year. But I think Kyren Williams is safer and has the same ceiling as any of those guys I just named.
Yeah, because the biggest thing is we're not sure how much that Taylor or Jacobs or really Achane is going to be involved in the passing game. The only guy that we know is going to outwork him in the passing game is Christian McCaffrey, and that's if he's healthy. And Bucky Irving, again, he has Rachaad White to cut into those totals in the passing game. Well, Kyren Williams is the everything back here for the Rams, and if he's supplementing his rushing production with that handful of touchdowns, enough yards, some catches, you get credit for in half and full PPR, then you're sitting pretty here. Now, everything could fall apart here, but this is what I think about with Kyren Williams. Hey, draft him early, and then everyone's going to just like sit, and you'll get your handcuff and Blake Corum. I don't think Jarquez Hunter is going to be ready. Just get Blake Corum later, and then you think they're similar type of backs, similar history in college. Size is kind of comparable. That they would just plug and play Corum if anything happened to Williams. So then you're set, right? If there's something with attrition that Williams would have to miss games, and there has been that case, right? He's missed a little bit of time, then you're okay. So that's your justification. And like some of these other situations are cloudier, right? CMC doesn't have Jordan Mason behind. Achane, where do you go without Raheem Mostert? Do you really trust what they have now? Josh Jacobs has a little bit of a interesting twist with Marshawn Lloyd back. So I think you have a clear case here. Just take it, and you'll get production, whether it's Williams for most of the games, which we hope, like he has been, and then you get Corum just in case something happens to him. So I think really what it is attaching yourself not just to Williams, but Sean McVay's offense and the rushing consistency you're going to get there.
Yeah, I think the hardest decision to make would be Bucky Irving or Kyren Williams. Just like because they're both in good offenses. They're both going. I do think Irving's going to get a huge workload this year, but Kyren Williams' workload will be bigger, but will Irving be more, efficient? I think that's the biggest discussion. If I'm choosing between Kyren Williams and Devin Achane, I'm going Williams. Kyren Williams or Josh Jacobs or Jonathan Taylor. I prefer Kyren Williams' side. CMC is just a super hard guy to figure out. If he stays healthy for the whole season, you're going to be super happy you draft him, and that's really what it comes down to. So that's a hard one. But we're going to transition now into these wide receivers because Puka Nacua, his 2 seasons, absolutely fantastic outside of, the injury of last year. And then Davante Adams slowed down a little bit over the last 2 years, but he's still a very, very good fantasy wide receiver. So let's get into that right after we hear from one of our sponsors. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. The Post Your Job new feature on LinkedIn can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. It's no wonder why 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, the Rams now have two really, really good wide receivers. And I'm still putting Davante Adams as a top guy in this league. Puka Nacua right now is ranked as the wide receiver 4 coming off boards in 2025 drafts. Davante Adams, wide receiver 18. Big drop off for him from what we're used to. Adams, even though last year it felt disappointing overall, he was still the wide receiver 10 in points per game at 14.2. And really, it was just the beginning of the year that was down for him. The second half of the season was fantastic. While Puka Nacua was the wide receiver 7 on average, wide receiver 6 in 2024, wide receiver 7 on average in 2023. He did miss a handful of games there with that hamstring injury, but was able to come back and really shine. So what are your thoughts on these two guys? Is Puka worth the wide receiver 4 cost? And is Davante Adams just a great value at wide receiver 18?
Yeah, I think Puka, we know his history says he's up there and he's going to be the alpha on this team. Now there's no more Cooper Kupp. So it's interesting that we have Cooper Kupp out the door and Adams in. So really Kupp with Nacua, they weren't on the field together a lot, right? I mean, this is partly why Nacua was on the rise because they needed to trust him as a number 1. Then he developed in his own right. Then Kupp couldn't stay healthy. And then it led to moving on from Kupp, which was the natural thing to do for the Rams. Now they get Adams, and you're right. He hasn't slowed down much. And this is a very interesting number that I pulled it up and I was like shocked how weird it was. 205 vacated wide receiver targets there for the Rams are just the key targets they're missing. 2 of those players were not just Kupp, but also Demarcus Robinson. Last year, they had 164 of those targets, caught 98 balls for 1,215 yards and 13 TDs. Now, when you look at Adams' career average with the Packers, Raiders / Jets, 156 targets, 99 catches, 1,288 yards, or 1,228 yards, and 11 TDs. The number is almost identical to what they were missing to what Adams' career average is. This is his kind of just his middle of the road season, right? That's how good this guy's been. If you look at those numbers, are incredible for an average season in the NFL. And again, his scoring has been way up there. So again, that duo, I don't think it maybe registered that Demarcus Robinson was scoring at a pretty high rate last year. So you had 13 touchdowns there. That's what Davante Adams has done throughout his career. Other than Mike Evans, he's been the most consistent in putting up those double-digit touchdowns. So everything is right there. Those numbers, again, are pretty much wide receiver 1 numbers here, and it's a different way it might get done, right? Puka is not a big scorer, but I could see Puka leading this team in actually yardage and having a good disparity between him and Adams to make up the difference. So they're both wide receiver 1s, where I think I'd see Adams being more efficient, having more receptions overall, and definitely I would bank on this, that he would have more touchdowns here than Puka. I mean, given the way that they use Kupp and Robinson in more scoring situations than Puka, that would figure to play out in itself. And you can also put Adams in the slot if you need to. I know Kupp was kind of used as a hybrid there, right? But I would expect a big year for Adams. Plus, where else are you going to go in this offense? You fall down to Jordan Whittington. You look at the tight end in transition now with Tyler Higbee potentially being faded out of this offense a little bit more. So I don't know where else you go, but the numbers to me are right there. Home run sitting on the tee here for that to happen here with Davante Adams and really play off Puka. And I don't think there's going to be too much of a drop off. And what Puka does, I think he'll only be better now that there'll be some coverage attention deflected in some games.
Yeah, just looking at both of these guys, I would be actually fine with drafting both personally. With Davante Adams, to focus in on him, yeah, he'll be 33, but not till December. I still do think he has one more good year in him. Like the beginning of last year was rough, right? He only played weeks 1 through 3, had the injury or whatnot with the Raiders, right? Really, it just looked like he was trying to get out. Gets traded to the Jets in week 7, takes some time to get going, but weeks 9 through 18, he averaged 16.8 points per game. That was behind only Jamar Chase, Mike Evans, and T. Higgins during that span. So he was a wide receiver 4 during that span. But also, he scored 6 touchdowns from weeks 13 through 18. Like, we know he's a touchdown machine. He scores at least 8 touchdowns every year. Really, double digits is what you can expect from him. So when you're looking at who he's around in rankings, I think Davante Adams is going to be on pretty much all my teams if he stays around this cost. I mean, he's going right after Garrett Wilson. That's a close call because, Wilson will get so many targets and is the clear wide receiver 1, but I think I prefer Adams with his quarterback and team situation. And then right after Adams, Rashee Rice, DJ Moore, Marvin Harrison, Zay Flowers, Cortland Sutton, Davante Adams over all of those guys very easily. So I love Davante Adams' cost. I think the bigger question here is Puka Nacua. Is he worth the wide receiver 4 cost? Because right now he's only going behind Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and CeeDee Lamb. And I mentioned the first 2 years in the league, he hasn't hit wide receiver 4 yet, right? Wide receiver 6 and wide receiver 7 in points per game. However, last year, if you take out the 2 games where he missed barely played. So I'm just counting the 9 games of the season that he played at least 30 snaps because he missed some games with injury. And then missed a couple games where he went out early in the game. So if you just include the 9 games, 30 snaps, he averaged 17.7 points per game in half PPR. That would be only behind Jamar Chase on the season. I do think Puka Nacua is one of the best wide receivers in this league. I think he could take another step forward next year, and I do think he is worth that wide receiver 4 cost. I may even be willing to put him at 3 over CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, I mean, here's what I'm going to say about this. I think you look at Davante Adams, I can almost guarantee he's not going to finish as wide receiver 18. Puka Nacua, I can't absolutely guarantee he won't finish at wide receiver 4. He definitely could finish as wide receiver 4. But keep in mind, you're also looking at a bunch of guys that are going to be close together. And we talked about a little bit about what Malik Neighbors can do, what Brian Thomas Jr. can do. Some of these guys on the rise. Amon-Ra St. Brown has got consistency, but I think you look at specific cases, right? I think I go Chase Jefferson, yeah, sure, over Nacua. But do I really want him here? I would say Nacua over CeeDee Lamb. I would really think about it, right? CeeDee Lamb now has a little bit of competition for targets. Well, Nacua is used to having Cooper Kupp on the other side, where Lamb is not, right? He's not used to having someone that they need to get the ball to in Dallas. So you can look at that. I think you look, okay, I think Malik Neighbors, there's a strong case that they're about equal here, and Neighbors doesn't have the quarterback situation. Then you look at Brian Thomas Jr. Will you get Trevor Lawrence to be on track here? So there's some question marks that you can go. So you can definitely justify taking Puka at wide receiver 4. Will he finish as a wide receiver 4? Definitely has a shot. Could he finish as a wide receiver 1? Definitely has a shot. Now, you just look at it, okay, you just have to know it's a safe pick. If you take him at wide receiver 4, you might not get that exactly, but you're going to get the production that we are used to from him there at that cost. So you're not going to have too much worry about your floor, and you'll still have a high ceiling. So again, you don't have to worry about that. It's hard at the top, right, to exceed those expectations because you're ranked so high. But I don't think you'll get a bust pick. I think you'll be a very good pick there with that spot. And Adams, you won't get the same value that you get in Adams, obviously, because there's not much more room to go up. But he's still a very worthy pick because of what he can do. And again, all the variables are clear cut for us. They're not there for this offense. We know exactly what we're going to get from the passing game.
Now, let me ask you, would you feel comfortable if you took Puka with, in the first round as your wide receiver 1, coming back and taking Davante Adams in the 3rd round or so as your wide receiver 2? Would you be comfortable with those 2 guys in your lineup every week?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it just depends on how everything plays out. I don't look at that, this guy's going to take away from this guy, right? If their numbers are there in the end and they're both consistently involved, and in this case, it is clear, right? I mean, it's like the Chase Higgins situation. These guys could absolutely dominate those targets, right? There's no real number 3, and that's what comes in. If there's a 3 that we factor in, then we don't like it as much, right? Even a tight end that is a factor. But again, I think it's very similar. Maybe the kind of the bargain. I don't want to say bargain because it's still pretty high, but the bargain version of Chase Higgins could be this combination.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of. When you think of the best wide receiver fantasy duos, it has to be, Chase and Higgins, or it could be Puka and Davante Adams. So those guys, I'm okay with taking together, as even though they're on the same team. I don't think that's a bad strategy at all. Now, if we're saying both Davante Adams and Puka Nacua are going to be good for fantasy football, does that mean Matthew Stafford will be a good value as well? Because he's sitting at quarterback 20, which seems pretty low for a guy that has, such great weapons to throw to. However, he was the quarterback 7 in points per game last year. So we have to discuss, to finish up today's show, if Stafford should be taken in one quarterback leagues. All right, let's finish up today's show talking about Matthew Stafford and his fantasy value for next year. Before we get into that, I want to thank everyone for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, Vinny. So Matthew Stafford right now sitting at quarterback 20 in consensus rankings between Trevor Lawrence and Tua Tagovailoa. And last year, he was the quarterback 27 on average. Now, he was missing Puka Nacua for a little bit of time. Cooper Kupp was missing time. And then also, towards the end of the year was just kind of pointless out there. Now you add in Adams. You have Puka Nacua, who hopefully will be healthy all year. It's not like he's been a dynamic fantasy quarterback, though, for pretty much all of his career. I mean, in 2023, 16 points per game. Not good. 2022, completely pointless for fantasy. 2021, even when he threw 41 touchdowns, he was a good fantasy quarterback at 19.4 points per game. But that's still not elite, right? And he threw 41 touchdowns, which I don't think anyone can expect him to do this year. We do expect, in the 30s, but 41 is quite high. So what is your feeling about Stafford? Can you even think about him in one quarterback leagues? Just keep him as a streamer. And then how interested are you with him in Superflex / 2 quarterback leagues?
Yeah, I'd like to see like a graph that shows Matthew Stafford's early career with the Lions. Like, I want to see it because it'll start. He was a great fantasy quarterback at one point with the Lions because they were stinky and they were chucking a lot in the second half. And now I would see that in relation to his reality quarterback arrow going in the opposite direction. So like one going up, one going down. That's what he's been. He's a better reality quarterback in Los Angeles because again they're executing. He's got a lot more help around him. The defense has been good. First in the Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey iteration, and now the young guys that are making plays, Jared Verse and the like. And we know this offense, looking at Kyren Williams, wants to stay balanced, run the ball, finishes often in the red zone with the running game. We told you with 26 rushing touchdowns there. I mean, that's the way they want to look at the drives, right? So he's been a better reality quarterback. Yeah. But he can get hot, and he's a guy that you can look at at certain points in matchups or stretches in the season. So again, he had a stretch last year from weeks 8 through 14. It was 1 week removed from the bye, and he just was tearing it up with some big games, and he cooled off at the end. He was a little bit slow in the beginning as well, putting up some yardage, but not the touchdowns. 19.8 points per game in that stretch. Again, as Michelle pointed out, when he's good, he's right around 19 to 20 fantasy points per game. So are we banging the table for you to take Matthew Stafford in the top 12? Absolutely not. But if you're playing the streaming game and looking for matchups and you're in 2 quarterback super flex leagues, he's a nice value because you're going to get stability, steadiness from him. You know what you're going to get. You're going to hope for 250 and 2 from him every week, right? That's what you sometimes need. You can have your upside guy in Superflex, take that early pick, but maybe he's a guy that you can pick another position or two, come back to him, or in a 2 QB league, you're going to get a good value later, right? You can pair him with somebody that you take 8 through 12 as a QB1 and get some good production. So I think that's where Matthew Stafford's value is. And again, I'm one of those guys who do play in certain leagues when I'm in the mood, like play different quarterbacks based on their matchups, right? I'm not always Mr. Plug and Play with my quarterbacks, and I like to play the matchups. Look, there's going to be some great matchups for the Rams because they're going to have to put the ball up, score a lot, get into some high scoring games. Then I want a piece of Stafford, right, where they could be trailing or in a situation where they're back and forth. Maybe those 49ers games could be nice, right, where the 49ers defense is not what it once was. So I think that's what I want to do, stash him for certain parts here. I think he's a solid backup in leagues. If something happens, he can plug and play. So I think I look at him overall, all around, as a very solid backup fantasy QB, which I think he has a more intriguing upside than, say, a Tua. That's around that ranking for sure, because, again, you're not even sure Tua is going to be healthy enough to start during your bye week or if your starter goes down.
Yeah, if I had to pick him or Tua as my, quarterback 2 in a league, I'm choosing Stafford. But yeah, I'm also not interested in him in one quarterback leagues. Definitely streamer though. Like you said, he does put up some big games from times, and he does have good stretches. There's just too many other options though above him that you'd rather take a shot on as your quarterback 1 in leagues, and that's including taking a shot on these guys coming into their second year and possibly developing, and Drake May and JJ McCarthy, or taking a shot on Bryce Young, who looked really good at the end of last year, or even Trevor Lawrence going right next to him. Like, at least Trevor Lawrence offers, a little bit of mobility and upside with his legs. And he has a really good, it seems like he's going to have a good play caller, and he has good weapons too. With Stafford, you're just getting literally 0 in the rushing game, right? He had 41 rushing yards last year, 65 the year before that, 9 the year before that, and 43 the year before that. It's just, that's 4 points on the season you're getting from him in rushing yards, just basically nothing at all. And that's his biggest downfalls. But you can stream him in good matchups because he can throw 4 touchdowns in any given game. That will be it for us today. We'll be getting into the San Francisco 49ers top 3 storylines on Wednesday. We're going to 3 shows a week for the month of June. We'll be back to 5 shows a week starting back up in July. But for the month of June, you'll be looking for us on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. That's when we'll be posting our episodes. So we will talk to you on Wednesday. See you then. Bye, y'all.